worst start ever. Hi guys. This is attempt number 3 at this video. So I'm over it. Hi Ollie. Do you wanna come sit with me? I'm gonna see if Ollie will sit with me. Come here. He doesn't like to be picked up. Hey, buddy. No. No. Stay. 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 There you go. Everybody, meet Ollie. This is Ollie. Hey, Ollie. Hi. You're hanging out with me on my vlog. That's so cool. I'm surprised. He's like been in a mood lately. I have to sit like this so that you... I need to fix my tablet so you... Oh, well. Meet and greet with Ollie is over, I guess. Now I can get back to my normal vlog. Normal vlog. Oh my gosh, I'm vlogging 2 days in a row. This never happens. I am so happy. Welcome, everybody, to Tea with Lily. This is a show where I have my tea with you and I talk about stuff. Ooh, that's exciting! I'm being so weird. So, okay, so I have started a series about coping with an adulthood autism diagnosis. So there's a lot of people out there who are receiving diagnoses of autism, excuse me, as adults. And I get people who contact me through my channel and through Facebook and all that, and that's all in the description if you want to get at me on social media. Be my friend, it's so great. So I have people like messaging me, and so this is a requested series of sorts about coping with autism, an autism diagnosis. How do you deal with that information? How do you move forward? Like, so a little backstory. If you're new to this series, to my channel, I have autism. I also have a chronic illness, commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME. And so I had my diagnosis of autism about 3 years ago, a little under 3 years ago. I've kind of lost count. And my chronic illness got worse, so I had a lot of health problems, a lot of neurological issues. And then I was given antipsychotics in the hospital, which you're not supposed to do, for autistic catatonia, which is another condition I have, another neurological condition. And the antipsychotics gave me tics, and so I have Tourette's and vocal and motor tics now. So a whole slew of issues. That's like the backstory real fast. So here we are, adulthood autism diagnosis. That's been my life, been my journey the last 3 years. Go check out the first video. I talk about coming out publicly as autistic as an adult. In this video, I will talk about, while actually drinking my tea before it gets cold, about stimming, specifically stimming in public. And so forgive me, first off, forgive me if this video gets long, because this is a big subject for me. It's something I'm very passionate about. Ollie's just sitting here. He's just sitting here. I want to show you. There he is. He's just being so... Ollie. So regal, man. Ollie. You guys are upside down, but... Oh, that's my nose. Gross. And my tea. And me. This is turning out to be a very strange vlog. I'm sorry, you guys. So stimming in public, that's a big question, that people newly diagnosed with autism as adults, or as young adults, what I, like, question of, like, whether they're gonna be publicly, like, let themselves have their autism behaviors in public. And so if you don't know what stimming are, like, the repetitive behaviors commonly seen with autism, like rocking back and forth, hand flapping, pacing, finger flicking, all of the things that I do. I stim a lot. If you watch my videos, you'll see me stim a lot. I'll post stimming videos, even so, just on my channel. Because I'm sorry, like, This is the third time I'm doing this video and I don't even want to do it. I don't want to do it again. Oh no, 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 don't do that. I have this thing about getting hair in my teacup. So the big thing with stimming in public, my stance is that I think everybody should feel free to do what they need to do to take care of themselves and to feel comfortable and happy. And so with autism, stimming isn't just a random thing that happens. It's beneficial. It's got a purpose to autistic individuals, and it's part of our like happiness and health and well-being. And so I genuinely believe, and I strongly believe, that autistic people shouldn't feel the need to conform at the sake of their own health and happiness, which is what what it ends up being. You're suppressing in public, and you can't deal with the environment as well, or whatever. I think there's no question. There's no question of if you should or if you shouldn't. To me personally. That said, I'm 3 years into it, and it's not an easy decision to make, and it's not an easy journey to make to find that acceptance within yourself, and then to find that acceptance and that sharing that the reality of autism and raising the awareness and the acceptance of autism in your community after your diagnosis. There's an important part of self-advocacy here, that adults have this responsibility that adults have being diagnosed that children don't have necessarily, because they have people advocating for them and on their behalf and all these services and support that a lot of adults maybe don't have, although they might have needed it. I could have done well with some support throughout childhood. Obviously my childhood was rough, and in adulthood I need more support now than I used to. I'm less independent now than I used to be, all things considered. And that's hard to cope with. Again, my story's different. I had circumstances happen where all of everything got worse. My functioning is worse because of my chronic illness and the autistic catatonia. Like, not a typical story. I understand that for sure. But being that I'm years into it, to share my perspective and my insight that like I said in my previous video, the biggest thing is give yourself time to process receiving this diagnosis, before you jump into these really heavy questions of like, do I let myself rock back and forth in public? I don't know. Like I said in the previous video, there wasn't a whole lot of choice involved for me. My nervous system went to crap, and now I have these things, and I have the tics, and I have to do these behaviors to deal with my environment and to process sensory information more so. It wasn't really a whole choice thing for me. Like I said in the previous video, like it came down to, do I want to go out in public or not? It wasn't, should I suppress my stimming in public? Because that wasn't an option. There was no like, it's not an option, because I could suppress, because I got used to that through my whole life, but I was suffering in the process. I was, it didn't take very long for me to maybe have a sensory overload or a meltdown or to have issues, because I wasn't allowing myself these tools and these coping mechanisms. Sorry, this shirt is becoming the sweater is becoming a sensory issue for me. Sorry, defensiveness moment. The shirt is like pulling back on my neck, and it's starting to really bug me. So I didn't have a whole lot of choice. There's people out there who receive this diagnosis, maybe they have stimming behaviors already, they keep them private, and then they're facing this question of like, should I let myself stim in public? That's a question I get from people. I didn't have that question so much because I didn't really have that choice. And so like, I can't really speak to that as much, except that I did have to go through that process of like adjusting to this new reality where I am having these behaviors. And like, if I'm fully honest, I don't think that I handled it as well as I could have or whatever, because I did isolate myself as a result. I just let my social life fall out from underneath me. Like, I just disappeared. Really, that's kind of what happened. I mean, if you ask anybody in my life, that's basically, like, I just kind of disappeared from the public eye in general. And a lot of that was life circumstances, like leaving communities that I was a part of and that kind of thing. And just, like, there was a lot of fallout for me when I came out public with my autism diagnosis. Just a lack of support and a loss of friendships, and like, it was a mess. And so I did have to struggle through that of like finding that self-acceptance and finding that like dealing with that shame and that embarrassment of like, I'm doing these weird things in public. Like, I, at that point, I prided myself on my ability to stay composed up to that point, because I'm an autistic person, and I was autistic before my diagnosis as an adult. Like, I was autistic before anybody else knew about it. Like, so I had these struggles, and I had this ability to mask things and appear a certain way. I mean, obviously, like, somewhat successfully, because it came as such a shock to a lot of people, because I deliberately made the effort to teach myself social skills and teach myself how to read body language and those common impairments with autism that people didn't see in me, because I made the effort to teach myself these things and to get better at these skills. They are skills that I learned that they don't come naturally to me. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. So it's gonna be hard, and you have to give yourself time, and you, like, unfortunately, the reality is, like, it takes time for people to process something like that. And the reality of, like, your diagnosis, maybe you have support and maybe you don't, but it takes people time to process a huge change. So you maybe won't have the support of people being like, yeah, like, rock back and forth if that's what you need, and maybe you do have that support, and if you do, that is awesome. Don't take it for granted. But it takes time for people to adjust to new things, and so give yourself time, but also give your family and your friends and, like, the people you know, give them time to adjust to that reality. It's not an easy question to answer, whether, like, you should just full stop, like, let yourself do these things in public. I tell people, like, who message me and they're struggling and, like, maybe they don't feel comfortable body stimming, like rocking or hand flapping in public, but I tell them it's important for you to take care of your nervous system, so try to redirect to, like, more discreet stims or to fidget toys, like, but because you need to give yourself that outlet. I tell people that, and I stand by that forever. Like, it should never be a question of suppressing yourself completely, because it does serve a purpose to autistic people. These behaviors aren't just random. They can be expressive and, like, intentional. Like, there's a lot of different things that stimming can be, but it's not pointless. I hate when I see in descriptions of autism that these repetitive behaviors are a meaningless repetition or meaningless repetitive behaviors. They're not meaningless. They're not pointless. They serve a very important purpose to help us deal with our environment and process sensory information. It's expressive. Like, to me, if you tell me not to flap my hands or to make noises, like, it's like putting duct tape on my mouth and binding my hands and saying you can't express yourself. Like, stimming is an expressive language for autistic people, and so not only are you taking away a tool when you say don't flap your hands, like, don't do these things, because you should be composed in front of people. Like, when you're taking that away from an autistic person, you're taking away their expressive language, you're taking their coping skills to deal with their environment. Like, and like, it's common for people to explain stimming, like, everyone has stimming, like, even at a low volume, like when you tap your pen if you're nervous and you're just waiting, or tapping your foot when you're waiting, like those kind of repetitive things that are comforting and calming to you when you're anxious. That's what stimming is for an autistic person, but the volume turned way up. So I'm rocking back and forth for an hour straight, you know, that's a pen tapping. You know, maybe it's self-comforting, maybe it's a dealing with stress, maybe it's dealing with the environment, like lots of different reasons that I might do that, but it's serving a purpose. So to explain that to people, there's a whole lot here, and the part of what I try to do with my videos is raising the awareness about stimming and about autism and about these behaviors, to try to take away some of that negative stigma and help people understand what's actually happening. That's what I'm trying to do here out on YouTube. And so there's a lot of that, like, there's a lot of responsibility on, like, society and people as a whole to try to change their perspective of these behaviors, that, like, just because someone is acting differently, that they shouldn't be treated necessarily differently, you know. And that was, for me, why it was so hard for me to go out in public initially after, like, my diagnosis and stuff. I became really isolated, really socially, like, withdrawn, because it was so hard for me to feel like, you know, if I'm doing these behaviors all of a sudden, or, like, maybe not all of a sudden, but around strangers or around people, like, I didn't want people to discount me as a person, to look at me and say, like, oh, you're, like, intellectually disabled, like, I shouldn't talk to you, I should talk to someone else for you. I didn't want to shut doors on myself for people not interacting with me because they thought I couldn't understand them, because from a distance I'm making noises and I'm rocking and I'm flapping and I'm looking pretty strange. You know, I hated the idea that people would perceive me in a way that was not who I was. And so there's a lot of like responsibility that on like just society as a whole. Like you have a responsibility to advocate for yourself and explain to people. I mean, as much as like I wish it weren't the case, you do have to advocate for yourself and say like, you know, I did for a long time explain myself to people like ahead of time. I'd say, hey, like, heads up, I rock back and forth a lot. I don't want you to think that means that I'm not okay. It usually doesn't mean a bad thing, because you think of like rocking back and forth as maybe just a negative, really negative thing. It means someone's really not doing well, they're really upset. You know, and I tell people ahead of time who maybe won't understand, or I used to anyway, who maybe wouldn't understand, for their sake, so they weren't worried for me that like, oh, I'm not like having a mental breakdown right now. I'm autistic. I just do these things. I don't do that so much anymore because a lot of it is just this coming to this place of self-acceptance and not feeling the need to explain myself to the world. And so a lot of that is a time thing. It's just taken time to come to terms, to like adjust to this new reality. For me, it was all very different. My life is very, very different now, and I'm a very different person than I was 3 years ago. And so for some people, it may not be so drastic of a thing. You know, you may say to someone, oh, I'm autistic, and they may be like, oh yeah, like, I can see it. For me, it was like, people didn't see it. And so they were like, what are you talking, what does this even mean? Like, why are you all of a sudden having these issues, you know? Again, my story's complicated, but just to say, like, before this video gets too long, oh gosh. I strongly believe that, like, there's a responsibility on those of us who can't speak for ourselves to advocate for ourselves and for the autistic community, and like explaining to general public what stimming is, you know, what these behaviors are and what they mean. You know, you do have that responsibility, and you gotta make that effort. Or like those of us out here like me, out on YouTube, that's what I'm doing with my life. Oh, basically is these videos of like trying to raise that awareness about autism, you know, that everybody's different and it looks different, and not to have so many assumptions about it. And that's what I ran from initially, was the assumptions. I hated the idea that people would assume about me that I was intellectually disabled and couldn't understand, when that's not the truth, you know. The reality that neurological symptoms and neurological things get perceived as mental illnesses, which is like a huge part of my story, like, and if you watch some of my videos, like I tell those stories, you know, being hospitalized for like autism related things that were perceived as mental illnesses. Like, that's a common experience for adults being diagnosed. So there is a lot of advocacy like required to help society understand about these behaviors, about what stimming is and what autism is. But in the end, it's about how you feel about yourself. In the end, for me, it was very, very much, there was a lot of self-love that I needed to learn. I needed to learn to love who I was, or who I am now, and to learn to be okay with these behaviors and these changes and these differences, that it was okay to be myself. It's okay to love yourself. It's okay to be strange and not feel like you're doing something wrong, that you owe the world an explanation. Like, it starts here. Like, it starts with you, and it starts with how you feel about yourself. For me, there was a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment associated with stimming and my behaviors, because that was something that was like punished out of me as a child. And that's another common thing I've heard, that people, they were punished for their fidgets and for their stims. And so there's a lot of like learned response there, a lot of fear and a lot of shame that you might have to work through, maybe with professional help. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I did go through therapy through this transition because it was difficult, and like, that may be necessary, and I don't want that to be something anybody feels any shame about. Like, if you have to, you know, have some help through your diagnosis, that's a, you know, that's okay. Like, it's hard. I feel like I'm jumping around here, guys. I'm sorry, and I'll end this video like super quickly. I'm just very passionate about this and just like what I've been through in my life. So I would say, like, yes, you should let yourself stim in public. And I know that's so much easier said than done. I'm 3 years into it and I still struggle. I still don't. Like, a lot of it is natural. Like, you've trained your body to be this way for so long, you know, if that's your story, like, you tried to pass as neurotypical up to your diagnosis, whatever, like, it takes time to train your body into something. It'll take time to train your body out of something. If you've, like, trained yourself, or you've learned to suppress what comes naturally to you, strange behaviors, rocking back and forth, like, it takes time to train your body to be afraid to do those things naturally. And so it's going to take time to get yourself out of that, is what I tell people. Like, it takes time. But find a community. And I'm not on Tumblr as much as I used to be. My blog actually has quite a few followers, and they're probably yelling at me for content, I don't know. But Tumblr was a huge thing for me because there's just a huge presence of autistic community and a lot of positivity and a lot of acceptance. Like, that was very huge for me in my acceptance journey. So find like-minded people who are going to encourage you on your journey. There is a group on Facebook that I'm newly a part of that I will link in the description. It's just a group of, like, Asperger's and autistic adults and people supporting each other. It's a great community. So find that community, and that positivity and that love and that, like, those messages of self-acceptance are really going to be pivotal. This little red, it's my blanket and it's bothering me. Sorry. Very, very important. If you don't have support, like, you're not going to make it through this. It's, and again, I apologize if any of this is, like, not relatable, because, again, my story is just really weird. But find community, find people to encourage you and make, like, to speak to you from the outside. Like, it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to stim. It's okay to have body stims. It's okay to rock back and forth. It's okay to take care of yourself. And that's going to be really important and really helpful and really healing, I think, if you've lived a life where you've told yourself and you've been told that these behaviors are not okay, stop doing it, like, you're nothing to the world if you're not composed. Like, that's kind of our societal, I don't know, addiction of belief. That is a word. Like, we are addicted to believing that composure is, like, everything, you know, social composure. So having that support, people to tell you from the outside, you know, watch YouTubers who are autistic and just, like, join a community where you feel accepted by peers. And give yourself time and don't rush it. For me, since, like I said, a lot of it can get really ingrained. So for me, it did actually come down to, like, I did have to say no to some social things because I knew, like, I'm going to slip into this place where I'm going to suppress, and it's not going to really feel like a choice because there's so much fear and there's so much, like, my body will freeze up and it'll lapse kind of into that trained response of, like, be normal, don't move, like, this, like, even talking about it, I can feel my body just, like, tensing up. There's so much tension and, like, fear, and I've got, like, trauma in my childhood, like, it's all a mess. And so, like, hopefully that's not everybody's story. Like, hopefully there's not trauma involved for everybody. But for me, like, I'd have to, like, forego things where I knew that I would instinctively tense up and not have access to these tools and to these behaviors, and that, like, I wouldn't last a second in this environment, in this sensory environment, if I can't rock back and forth, or if I can't, like, I had to be very choosy. And that's part of why, like, my life sort of fell out from underneath me, my social life, because I just, you know, at a certain point where I was just like, I know I can't go hang out with this person, or I know I can't go to this place or hang out with this many people at once. Like, I just knew my limits. So know your limits and don't push yourself. Redirect if you can. Get fidget toys, and, like, I started with fidget toys before I, like, transitioned to letting myself, like, flap my hands and stuff around people. I'm not all the way there yet. Like, 3 years into it, I'm not. And I'm sorry, this video is so long. Oh my gosh. I'm freaking out. Sorry, guys. I'm not all the way there yet. My vocal stimming, so I make a lot of noise. A lot of it's expressive, but a lot of it's, like, just getting that sensation in the back of my throat. Sensory-wise, it's very sensory-seeking behavior for me. I struggle to do that around people and not feel, like, ashamed or embarrassed. So I'm 3 years into it, and I'm still not there yet. Like, there's still certain things where I feel like, oh gosh, like, don't disturb people. Like, there's, like, in my mind, there's, like, a hierarchy of, like, what's more loud, and I feel like that's pretty common. You know, maybe someone playing with a fidget spinner, I tell people, like, fidget spinners are great, because they became a fad and everybody has them and it's not a big deal. Like, you can hide behind that. Everyone has a fidget spinner, so like if you're trying to keep to yourself, maybe you don't want the world to know you're autistic, but you need to stim, you know, fidget spinners are great because everybody had them at some point, you know, like it's whatever. My biggest thing is just tell people to make sure you're taking care of yourself. So, okay, so this video got really long, but I'm super, like, stimming is kind of my thing. That's kind of my platform. And this is take 3, and I don't know how much I got into this video that I originally wanted to say. I hope all of it. I hope. I'm sure I'll revisit this topic of stimming, because I stim a lot, and it's kind of my thing. I'm trying to raise awareness about what stimming is, and being an autistic adult who stims a lot. Trying to dispel a lot of the stigma about what stimming is and what it means about an individual. Does not mean that I am broken. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with my brain. Like, stimming is neurological, has to do with our nervous systems, has to do with the difference of our brains. Like, it's just, yeah. And I think I gave the pen tapping metaphor already. Like I said, I've tried to do this video 3 times, so I apologize if I've repeated myself or if I've left stuff out. This is, excuse me, oh, this is a huge subject for me. So before it reaches 30 minutes, before it is too long to, like, exist. So, biggest thing, be yourself, take care of yourself, and give yourself time, is what I would say. But it's, yes, if you have any questions, anything about stimming that you want me to talk about, or whatever, comment, like if you're into the series, dislike if you're not. I like all kinds of feedback, and thank you for sitting with me through this video. Thank you so much. I hope I made sense. Like, subscribe, comment, let me know you're out there. Interacting with you guys is like the highlight of my life, basically. Getting comments is just like super great. It makes me so happy. I am gonna go out this evening and do fun social things and hopefully get some stimming footage for you guys. I don't know, maybe that would be great. Cap to this video. The end. Oh my gosh, so long. Thank you guys, and stay tuned for more videos about coping with adulthood autism diagnosis. Stay classy. If you're autistic, you're newly diagnosed, hang in there, stim freely, and the end. Goodbye, my friends.